Well, welcome everyone to the Real Interrogation Room, led by a real former interrogator. And I'm Lena Cisco, and today I have a special guest, and he's very special for two reasons. First, he's also a former interrogator, and I got to work with him teaching interrogation way back in the day, but also because this is really the first official video for my YouTube channel. So I thought, you know what? We should have two real interrogators talking about interrogation for our opening video. So thank you, Jim. I call him Jim. He's known as
Yeah,
James Pyle. Welcome, and can you introduce yourself to everyone?
sure. I'll go from backwards back to the beginnings.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
I'm the founder of Conversation Codex, your conversation's friend, where I bring all of my experience from interrogation training, strategic debriefing trainer, elicitation, and all those tools to your street and your conversations. And with that, the best thing I can do today is to say that everything that we do is a conversation, and we just happen to have some more particulars when it comes to interrogation.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, that is really going to drive our first question. But for those of you who don't know me, Lena Cisco, I am a former Navy trained interrogator. Actually, no, I already lied to you. I am a Navy intelligence officer, Marine Corps trained interrogator. So it gets a little confusing. But I am a Department of Defense certified military interrogator, which back in the day after 9/11 and all the chaos that was happening when this country really had to deal with terrorism, it was very important that you were a DoD certified interrogator,
Mhm.
unless you came for state or federal law enforcement, such as FBI or NCIS, which you had that formal training, because there was some people jumping into that interrogator slot who did not have that formal training and made some really poor decisions and gave us a bad name.
Mhm.
So we don't like that. And we're here to give us a good name and explain what interrogation is about, but a little bit more about my background. After that, because after 9/11, I deployed to Gitmo, where I interrogated members of Al Qaeda and Taliban. And then I worked for numerous three-letter agencies as a government civilian and as a contractor. And at some point in 2013, I got tired of trying to find jobs. So
Mhm.
I created my own company. And now I am the CEO and founder of two companies, the Congruency Group and Sector Intelligence. And in both those companies, I bring human intelligence, which interrogation falls under that classification of HUMINT, which stands for human intelligence. I bring them to the private sector and a lot of business leaders and business owners to help them make wiser decisions and help perfect their communication practices. And Jim and I were just having a conversation before we went on and started recording about really what interrogation is. It's a conversation, and it's a very well thought out, prepared, planned, effective conversation. But before we get into our first question that we're going to discuss, Jim, tell us about your interrogation experience because you were an interrogator.
Well, okay, I joined the military later in life than most people that you would encounter. And I used to be a salesperson before that and radio DJ. And so I knew how to talk and I knew how to communicate and I knew how to get people to give me money and time and information before I even became an interrogator because that was my living.
Mhm.
I sold something everybody needed, nobody wanted, cemetery property. And with that, I think I brought a great skill set to the Army when I joined in 1984. And they sent me to Fort Huachuca to the interrogation school, DLI for the language training twice. And with that, I was quickly turned over to the schoolhouse after just a few years because I seem to have something they wanted me to share with students, and I've trained uh, upwards of a thousand plus, I'm sure, somewhere along the line, interrogators, and with as a DoD instructor as well. So that when I joined the Army in 1984, it was for 20 years. I knew that from the very first day. It wasn't for 4 years, another 2 years or 6 years. It was for 20 years. And when I retired in 2004, I came to DC and worked with Jerry York and John Nolan. and with you eventually, and with others. And so I've had the most wonderful career. I've worked with the most wonderful people, and I wouldn't be who I am today without that composite of people who are the best of the best of the best. So what more do I say? It has affected my personal life, my business life, because I use it every day. The skill set of conversation, controlled conversations, directed conversations, casual conversations. It's all affected all those.
I love it. And, there's so many things that we have in common. So Jim and I did work at a company together, training DIA, DoD in
Mhm.
interrogation, training those students. But we also both trained while we were in the service as well. And that's really where
Mhm.
I got my start. I never instructed before the military. And
Mhm.
I know you joined the Army thinking 20 years, I'm in the whole deal. I joined the Navy on a dare. Um, and I was like, oh, I'll stick around for a little bit. I signed a 6-year contract. I'm like, I can hang for 6 years. After that, I'll probably move on and try something new or different. Ended up staying for 11 years. But when I was at the 11th year, I really truly felt I'm not going to deploy anymore. I don't get to be in the sandbox having fun. I think at that point, I offered everything I had to help people, to bring them up to leadership, and I was ready for a change. So I was like, it's not time for me to stick around anymore. It's time for me to embark on a new adventure. Still using all those techniques, though.
Mhm.
And you and I really stuck with the path. I know that I have a why as to what I do today. I train state and federal law enforcement around the country. And I have my own, obviously, I train private sector and my own businesses. But my why is to always give people techniques and tools to use to know who to trust and make better decisions, whether it's in your
Mhm.
personal or professional life. And I think you can definitely attest to that and feel the same way because you're still doing it too.
Sure, sure. I wouldn't know what else to do.
Mhm.
I want to make a difference. I want to have you say, wow, I didn't know that. I'm going to try that. It works. And that's as simple as that. Some of the things we know and do, it can be employed so easily. I want to say too, also, I don't know if you can see here back over my shoulder. That's the first book, Body Talk Animated. And just this week, we've fully funded the follow-up book, Body Talk Animated 2, for the teenage body language point of view. We're pushing down body language from criminal analysis and all that to young people so that they understand threat, they understand friend, they understand how to present their own communication, the skill through body language by watching animated movies and learning from an entertainment standpoint. So I just wanted to put that in that we're excited to be able to start that book, and hopefully by the fall we should have it ready to go again.
Ooh, excited. All right. Awesome. Awesome. That's so cool. And, I love that people, when they hear body language, just like when they hear interrogation, automatically have an idea of what it is, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Automatically have this stigma like, oh, body language. Oh, you can read my mind, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, no, I can't do that. I wish I could make my job so much
Mhm,
easier, but it's self-aware and situation aware. So when I teach
mhm.
body language, I'm always teaching number one, you have to be aware of how you're coming across. Number two, then you can be aware of other people.
Sure.
Yes, you can use it to detect deception. Obviously, that's what we've been doing for decades. But you can also use it to change your behaviors to be more effective communicators as well.
Mhm.
When you
Absolutely.
truly understand like how even to sit or stand a position. And it's funny because just this morning when I was texting you as I was on a call, I was like
Mhm.
multitasking. I was talking to a colleague of mine. She's in a networking group I'm in called the Advanced Innovation Society under Kelly Roach, and she is a style expert, and she really focuses it with feng shui and helps women, career women, to choose the perfect outfit for a situation so that they can feel powerful and confident. And I
Mhm.
thought,
Mhm.
how interesting, because I teach people on how to position their body language to do the same thing. Suppress cortisol, feel powerful and confident. So we're going to tag team and do a little segment together. Maybe I'll have her on the show.
You
But
should. You should.
cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into our first official question.
Okay.
And that literally is, what is interrogation to you? right? How do you define it?
Okay. Before I became an interrogator, I had a view of it that it was a hard thing to experience, a hard thing to execute, um, a hard thing to watch. As I was introduced to it professionally, I found it to be a very simple thing to do once you understood the methodology, once you understood the human condition, and once you understood the environment that you're in, the how to take advantage of all of those things to get people to cooperate with you by sharing information. Three things people will not give you freely. They won't give you money freely until they trust you. They won't give you information freely until they trust you. And they won't give you their time because that costs trust as well. So, what I've learned is to develop that trust, have empathy, lean in and listen. Two ears, one mouth. You can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink.
Yep.
But if you make them thirsty, just make them thirsty, they'll drink all by themselves. And so that's what I learned from the beginning. And then looking back on the training I had, the life I've lived, I realized it's just a simple conversation
Mhm.
that starts with curiosity. It may have to have some structure, but I like to start with no structure, aware to them, apparent to them. I have structure. I have it back here ready to work and map through. But I want that person and I'm not interrogating, I'm having a conversation with that person to think that we're just starting fresh. I don't know more than what you can tell me. And then I'm going to listen to what you have to tell me and discern if I can trust that or if I need to work on that. But it's a conversation. And it just starts with curiosity, which is my watchword for any conversation I have on the street, on the telephone. I have things to be curious about, and I exercise that all the time. And I probably shouldn't. I probably should just relax some, but I don't.
No, why
It's
would
always
you?
that. My daughters would always say, "Dad, do you have to talk to everybody?" I said, "Yeah."
Yep.
But it's a conversation, and you know it can be a controlled conversation, it can be an intense conversation, but it really just needs to be an honest conversation. Now, sure, I'm going to manage some truth. That doesn't mean I'm lying, okay? I will
Mhm.
manage some truth, and I might not share all that I know, but my motive's right, and my methodology is right. I've never been put in jail yet. I've never been called in front of a Senate committee yet, and so I think I'm okay that way. But it really is just trust and commonality. Commonality is important. You have to find what you have commonality with. Um, so that comes through the conversation. That comes through the curiosity.
Mhm. Oh, I love all that. I don't want to take notes because usually you speak wisdom and I'm always like writing this down. So
Well, we're recording, right?
I am recording. That's right. So I
Yeah.
can go
Okay.
back. Yeah, so I am. But so I love the fact that you said time, information, and money. I remembered it because I created an acronym called TIM. When you want TIM, you need trust, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I always am preaching that trust brings you truth. It's like the two pillars of an honest conversation.
Sure.
If you have trust, you'll get the truth.
Hmm.
When I teach my interviewing method to law enforcement, I'm always saying this day one, like hour one. You will not get the truth from anyone if they do not want to give it to you, right?
Hmm.
And I'm getting animated, knocking my mic over. So the question becomes not how to get the truth. The question becomes, how do I get you, whoever you is, to want to tell me the truth?
Hmm.
That's the question. When you can
Yeah.
figure out that piece, and it may take you the bulk of the conversation, the truth will come so easy. It will
Mhm.
naturally come after you have trust. And I tell people, I'm like, you're going to do a lot of planning and prep work up front for this conversation, a ton of it, even before you have it, while you're having it. You're going to have patience. You're going to be persistent. You're really going to connect with people, like you said, build that rapport, gain their trust. And that may take you 30 minutes. And then all of a sudden, once you have that trust, and you go into our really effective questioning techniques or possibly elicitation to get the
Mhm.
information, that part's the easy part. It's so easy, and the information will come.
Sure. Sure. I just absolutely know that elicitation is the most productive conversation.
Yes.
Questions bring defense, questions bring other questions. And I've never used the word question of anybody I've ever talked to. I caution students always, I say, don't say, I want to ask you some questions.
Yeah.
Just ask them.
Just
Okay.
ask them.
Don't advertise it. Don't broadcast it.
Oh, I
You know,
love that. Yeah.
or do you mind if I ask you some questions? They can say no. You know,
Yeah.
but talk about a conversation. I like to talk to you about, and then ask a question. A
Yeah.
little bit of a framer. So those are just little conversational tweaks that really work if you employ them well. And of course, it takes training. We
Yes.
people listening to this conversation can pick up some little things, but unless they have the training, they can't employ it well. And the questioning concept is really basic, but not doesn't come natural to people.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that especially reporters and especially people who think they're good at it. The I watched a lot of interrogations and a lot of interviews on television programs and stuff, and it's hard for me to do.
Oh, let me tell you. Yes, it is. I can feel the anger building up inside me when my biggest pet peeve in the world. Are you ready for it? My biggest pet peeve, bad questions. And
Yeah,
I hear them from reporters all the
yeah.
time. And I'll share two examples really, really quickly because I show these videos in my strategic law enforcement interview class and my other classes.
Mhm,
Anthony Weiner, I'm sure everybody knows his name, right?
mhm,
It's
mhm,
quite
mhm.
infamous now.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of videos while he was lying, when he was lying at first, that I show to the class. And he's asked yes and no, point blank questions, right? Yes or no, did you send the tweet? That's a yes or no question. Now, typically I avoid them because you only get a yes and no.
Mhm,
It gives a person an easy way out of giving you detailed information. It can shut down a conversation. But there's one time I do ask them, and I find them to be very effective. And that's when I want to see if you're being truthful with me or lying. Because
mhm,
what I'm looking for is a simple yes, no answer, not an embellishment of yes and no, like what Lance Armstrong did way back in the day. He was asked a yes or no question when he was lying about taking the drugs, and his response was absolutely 100%. And I thought, because that's an embellished form of yes. And we know liars try to convince, truth tellers try
mhm.
to convey. So truthful people typically have no problem just saying yes. And
That's
then he wasn't
yeah.
congruent. He was shaking his head no. All right. So I'll ask that. But Anthony Weiner is asked this question over and over. Did you send the tweet? Did you send the tweet? And one report is like, listen, all you got to do is say no. And guess what? Throughout that long interview, guess what he never can do?
Say no.
Say no. Never.
Yeah.
Not once. Not once, right? Hillary Clinton, the same thing. She was asked that whole with the wiping the server scandal. I
Yeah.
have videos on her and over, right? The same question literally for 4 minutes. Did you wipe the servers clean?
Mhm,
Never, not once could she say a simple no. She
mhm,
jokes about it like, oh, what with a cloth? She does this. I mean,
mhm.
everything. She never says no. Anyway, there's my biggest pet peeve. A couple of reporters who shall go nameless when they're interviewing some infamous people, such as Drew Peterson back in the day, when they were interviewing Jodi Arias and
Mhm.
Alec Murdaugh, will ask a forced choice question, right? Well, did this happen or that happen? How about what happened? How about that? Right? I mean, just make it nice and simple. But I'm like, why would you force somebody to choose something? So, going back to the first question, what is an interrogation? And I'm on the same page as you 110%. It's a
Mhm.
conversation. And a lot of times people ask me, well, what's the difference between an interview and interrogation? I say nothing. Nothing. There is no difference. To me, it's a conversation I'm having with a human being that first I have to gain their trust. Second, I have to get the truth. That's it. And whether
Mhm.
my interview is trying to decipher the truth on your resume and I'm hiring you as a job candidate, whether that is I'm working on a criminal case or a cold case, I'm trying to find out if you have information that can help this case. It doesn't matter whether you're talking to your children, you want to really find out what happened on the schoolyard and if you had a part, right? If I'm after the truth, then it's a conversation. And so a lot of people get hung up around interrogation. And of course, back in the day, shortly after 9/11 and after my deployment and all the horrors that happened in Iraq and at Abu Ghraib with not interrogators, but
Mhm.
MPs, interrogation got a really bad rep, like really
Yes,
bad.
yes,
So
yes.
much so, I didn't never wanted to say I was one. I would say, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm an interrogator because I knew people would be like, oh, then
Oh,
you did
mhm.
those human pyramids. No, no,
Mhm.
actually did not do that. And that was the waterboarding and the torture talk and all this horrific stuff. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know like where you got this information, but if you were to sit with me in my interrogations at Gitmo, you would absolutely
Mhm.
know those are lies. My thing was rapport based. It's bringing in movies, it's bringing in mint tea, it's bringing them cigarettes, it's, helping them out, it's getting them medical attention, all of that stuff. Never once did any of this other stuff happen, all these
Mhm. Mhm.
atrocities. But yet people say it did. And my gut reaction is, "Oh, when were you there and where did you see it?" Right? Even
Mhm.
though it's a compound question. But it's the news, right? And the news just gives interrogation a bad
Sure,
rep. I mean,
sure.
even saying it sounds harsh, but what it is a pre-planned, thoroughly planned conversation with an objective. And it's always rapport based and non-accusatory, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Mhm. Mhm. No rapport, you got no conversation. No
Thank
conversation,
you.
you got no information.
Thank
And
you.
we have a common friend, Robin Greek, who's a great rapport builder, writer. Anything you see a book with his name on it, buy it and read it and put it in your library and keep it close by,
It's
along
behind
with
me too.
along with Lena's work and stuff. And we have so many friends. I can't leave all the names out, but
I know.
absolutely, we have a wonderful circle of professional, personal people
Mhm.
who, if you knew them personally, you would understand why they get trust, why they get people to change their mind, and when there's a dark room and that little bit of light comes through, they run to the light,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we pointed out to them, we send them there, and
Yes.
they looking for a way to unburden themselves, a way
Mhm.
to
Yes.
advantage themselves in a disadvantaged situation. So normally interrogations associated with people who are bound and who don't have freedom, and the interrogator has a lot of influence, and it can make it very, very beneficial,
Yeah.
you know, to a prisoner of war and that kind of thing. But no, most people wouldn't realize that the most recognized interrogator en chef of Nazi Germany
Yeah.
was a master, and a lot of our technique that we use today, the successful, reasonable, personable technique, is mirrored from his work,
Yeah.
and he's come after World War II and has influenced this business, uh, influenced the POW experience. We train high risk personnel who are going to be most likely exposed to being captive, to train them with some of the things, skills that we learned through him and others, so that it doesn't have to have a political name or a political color, or it works. People stuff works. And
Yeah.
I like to talk about food. I like to talk about everything in the rainbow, and then I find interest. I never want to tell anybody that I know all about you. I know you. I know what you've done.
Why
You
would you?
tell me what happened. Why are you here? I have no clue. And then they tell me their story, and then I want to hear the story again, and then I'll find the places I'm really interested to open up about the story if I'm not buying it, and then we'll have that conversation.
Yes.
you know. But absolutely, I've enjoyed the training part of it, and to turn it back to every day.
Hmm.
Doesn't have to be in a facility. It can be right here between us. It can be on the street. I take it to the street, and I want to do that more now than I can with a classroom of 30 people. That's too many to try to impart particulars. So I'm trying to bring my audience down to one, two, or three, and go where they are, take them to the street, show them that elicitation works, show them that good questioning works, show them that rapport works, and it can affect their business. It can affect their person. There are a lot of people who I talk with who aren't comfortable with conversation. They don't like to have conversation because they're not comfortable with it. And the Navy adage, Navy SEAL adage, it's important to just learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes.
And that's what I want to do with conversation. Get people comfortable with that conversation so that their conversations can be productive. And if they're, we train down in Fort Bragg, civil affairs folks, and half the class sometimes would say that they're introverts and they
Mhm.
don't like to talk to people, and that's
Mhm.
their job. So we had a week to kind of affect that and kind of make a difference to that every time we went down. And I made that my objective
Mhm.
as a subset of the class. We had the class what we had to train and teach, but my subset was to get them more comfortable at the end of that week by a certain procedure that I employ that starts with very little of a conversation to then employ a broader conversation, more comfortable.
I love that. And for introverts, they have an advantage because really, if you are in a formal type of interview conversation where you have an objective and you're not just building rapport and meeting people, then you're the driver of that conversation. And you actually going to do less talking. But if you have the most effective questions and effective
Mhm.
elicitation, provocative statements, you can drive that conversation to wherever you want to go
Absolutely.
while building rapport, while making that person feel so comfortable sharing this information. So, as the driver, and this, we speak less. When
Mhm.
I watch any type of interrogation online on YouTube, whatever, real world, and the interviewer, interrogator, lead person is doing 70% of the talking and just talking and talking and talking and doing
Yes.
hypotheticals and saying, well, I know why you did this, because it drives me insane. Like,
Yeah.
stop talking. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be talking. Well, I think this is a perfect segue because you did mention Han Scharf into what key ingredients make an effective interrogation. Well, let's just change that word and just call it a conversation. We're going to do a little pivot. So,
Okay.
what key ingredients, right, make a conversation effective when trying to reach an objective?
Well, I fall back to another common friend we have, Greg Hartley, and he thinks, and I think with him, that if we understand this person that we meet initially up front, whatever the circumstances are, and put them wherever they are in Maslow's hierarchy,
Mm,
that's the best start. To just start where they are. If they are not in control of where they are, they're not in control of what they eat, they're not in control of any comfort items, that's where I want to start.
yeah.
And I want them to eat. I want them to be comfortable. I want them to have water. I want them to be, you know, to feel safe and comfortable before we go on, because that's their most basic need right now.
Yeah.
And if I try to just get them to have a conversation when they're hungry, cold, fearful, all those things, that conversation is not going to happen.
Hmm.
So we just got to find out where they are. Now, they may be somebody who's very important, very self-assured, and in a position in life and profession that is, they're not uncomfortable and they're not hungry and they're not,
Yeah.
uncertain about who they are. I've got to go up the Maslow's hierarchy a little higher and maybe become the student and maybe become what we call, you use what we call P and E up, pride and ego
Yep.
up, and really give them the sense that I respect them.
Yep.
I think they know something that I would like to know, and I will then use my curiosity and my rapport. Rapport starts at the speed of sight.
Yes, it does.
It's like the speed of light. It's the speed of
Speed
sight.
of sight.
That's when rapport starts. And so you've got to be yourself, and you got to present, and then read all within milliseconds.
Yep.
It begins.
Yep.
And then rapport's rapport, good rapport, bad rapport, it's rapport. You just got to maintain it. You don't build it, you manage it.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
feed it. If it
Yes.
gets hungry, feed it some more. But
Yes.
but to have the rapport is foundational, and without it, you're just just paddling in a whirlpool.
Yeah. I tell people, I'm like, listen, don't even think about asking a pertinent question, and a pertinent question, whether that be about the topic, the event, the whatever, reaching your
Mhm.
objective, until you have that person's trust.
Mhm.
So make sure on that rapport, it's sincere, it's genuine. Don't lie about it. Don't be
Mhm.
ingenuous. Don't be fluffy about it, because people are reading you as much as you're
Sure,
trying to
sure.
read them, right? And they may not have had a body language class or an interrogation class, but they have a gut feeling. If their gut feeling says, "Oh,
Yep.
you're kind of creepy. I really don't believe that you truly are interested in me," then you're
Mhm.
never going to
Mhm.
get that trust. And it's
Sure.
being so aware of taking that one thread. I call it pulling threads, right? And
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
find that one thread that connects us, that one thread that shows that I have an interest in you, that I know you're going to be interested in me, whatever that is, and I pull that thread and I go very deep into
Mhm.
using that one thing that really connects us to forge trust. Because if I have a bunch of threads and I'm like, oh, Jim, you and I like this and we like that and I like
Mhm.
that, but
Mhm.
then and they're all kind of shallow, it's not going to be sincere and genuine. So I take that one thing that I know this is going to be so interesting in you. You and I can talk so much about it. We
Mhm.
truly have this emotion connected to this thing. That's what I'm going to connect with you on. That's when I'm going to build rapport. And I'm going
Mhm.
to take my time with it and really show that interest. Once you have that, now you can pivot to the part of the conversation that's going to help you reach your objective. But don't go
Mhm.
there too soon, because you're
Oh
not going to
no.
get the information you want.
Yeah, yeah. Time is important, and the people who have the least amount of time to make an assessment and to making a difference are 911 dispatchers, who
Yes.
have to be great interrogators, who have to take a situation that might be life threatening, and within the context of a phone call, assess the truth, basic facts, and respond to that within seconds and minutes. The
Mhm.
interrogator may have seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, but the 911 operator needs to be the best interrogator on the planet, in the States, and all around the world, because their job is just like our job,
Yeah.
except they don't have time.
Yes. Yeah.
And they'll have I wish you and I and others could build a curriculum to help those who
Yes.
have that job and maybe don't do it as well as they could.
Yep.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
but so anyway, I listen to 911 calls, and I hear good ones, great ones, and I hear some poor ones and some difficult ones. So,
Mhm.
I believe that there's something we could do someday from our field to help their field to be better and do well, because life and death matters every day.
Yeah.
Fall in on that.
Well, let's do it because I analyze 911 calls. After I'm done with my classes, I usually tell my students, I'm like, listen, if you want me to analyze a 911 call, and I'm doing it from the point of truthfulness and accuracy on the caller, right? What do I hear that may be incongruent, or, certain words that are hot spots, and say, hey, listen, the truth just slipped out. You may want to focus on that. But I would love to do that because it's all about two things, right? Especially, and this is going back to the importance and effective conversation. Two critical things. Number one is your ability to listen.
Mm-hmm.
You have to listen to people. When you listen to people, you're going to hear a whole bunch of words. You're going to hear verbs and adjectives and nouns and direct objects and filler words and all this stuff. And you get to take all those words and say, okay, is there a lead in this? Is there something super important I should follow up on? Is this truthful? Is it deceptive? What in here is something that I should dig further into? And if we don't listen, we may miss something so critical,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And that could even go back to what we were just talking about with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Say you're talking to someone, and I always like to do like leadership roles, right? When you're bringing your employees or anybody in human resources or employee relations, you may have to have some really challenging conversations with people, either giving them feedback, correcting behaviors, investigating like an ethics violation or something like that. And if you're bringing people in, you're still going to do the same thing as us interrogators do: create a safe environment, make them feel comfortable, right? And connect with them before you jump into this conversation. And of course, I just squirreled it and went on a train of thought, and I lost my train of thought now. But listening to people, right? I know it came back. Listening to people is going to help you discover their needs. Like you said with
Yes.
Maslow's, right?
Yes.
At the bottom, that low tier, that's an easy need to meet. That's really
Yep.
easy.
Some
As you
water,
climb,
some
right?
food,
Water,
a
food, safety,
blanket.
shelter.
Yeah. All that.
Right? That's easy. But as you climb up that tier, right, and you put yourself into a situation where you're in employee relations and you're giving feedback to a high level employee, right, to change or correct a behavior that needs correcting, you got to figure out what their need is that's going to motivate them to either listen to the feedback without emotion and not taking it personally, to tell the truth and say, yes, this is what I did or didn't do, right? So what is that motivation to get people to tell the truth? And it comes with identifying a need. And sometimes we have to have that conversation in that rapport building part of the first beginning of the conversation to discover this person's need to motivate them to want to be truthful.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Our questions bring other questions and bring answers to things. And if you're like me right now, I'm just pinging off all the different places and faces and so connectivity. It's only in four areas. There's you can connect with people that you know, commonality or known people, places you've been, things that you have or things that you know,
Yeah.
and or shared events in time. There's nothing else to connect to, but all those connect so easily.
Yeah.
You could have an event in time and a person and a thing and a place all connect, or at least just one or two. And that connectivity then just creates instant rapport,
Mm-hmm.
enhanced rapport,
Yeah.
and lets you step in a little closer, ask a little more specific, with good questions, basic interrogatives. It starts a good question. Doesn't mean it's going to end that way, but it starts a good question. Who, what, where, when, how, and sometimes, huh?
Yeah.
But but really, it's an important discipline, questioning. But questioning doesn't work by itself.
Yeah.
It has to have rapport and body language and congruency and empathy, all those things.
Yeah.
And if you don't have most of that, you're really not in the best position to do this job.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing that, because it's actually the second thing. I know I kind of squirreled off on a track on the one thing, right?
Mhm,
So listening is critical, but the other part is really commanding your words, whether it's in the form of a question or a provocative statement or
mhm,
just a narrative if you're doing a quid pro quo, sharing some
yeah,
information. But it's being confident with every single word that comes out of your mouth. And that takes
mhm,
practice, right? It takes knowing the technique, effective from
yeah.
ineffective, and then taking those effective techniques and practicing them. And with practice gives you that confidence. And all of a sudden, the words are just exiting your mouth. You're like, yeah, that sounds good. That's exactly what I meant to say. Instead of, oh, I wish I didn't say that.
Well, that's the very first thing I try to talk with people who are having difficulty with conversations
Yep.
is I say, talk out loud, get out of your head,
Oh, yes.
because you're
Perfect.
talking inside here, and every time you hear your voice, you're uncomfortable because you're not used to that. So I say, talk out loud all day long. Hear your voice, be comfortable with your voice, and then people will be comfortable with you because you're comfortable with your voice. But you got to talk and hear yourself and not just think yourself. Uh, I
Yeah.
talk to people without even looking at me. I was at the cleaners the other day, and a lady had a T-shirt on which had the state of Florida on it.
Mhm.
And so I said, somebody likes Florida. She's not even looking at me. She's in front of me. And she turns around and says, well, yeah, that's where my son's at. I said, really? Yeah, he's down in, he just joined that new Space Corps. Really? And she began to tell me a little bit about him as she's waiting in line. And all I said was, somebody really likes Florida.
Yeah.
And I could have been wrong. It could have been an old used shirt that she didn't care about. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong.
Hmm.
She turned and we had a conversation.
Hmm.
That's the elicitation provocative statement. And I do it all day, every day to get people engaged. I was at the PX today over at Fort Belvoir, and there's a gentleman standing in front of a giant barbecue grill. It looked like it ought to be in a professional kitchen instead of on your patio. And he's looking at it with his drink. I said, I think you probably have to have a license to operate that thing.
That's
He
good.
said, well, I have to have a license just to cook. I said, really? And again,
I love
it,
it.
it just a statement. And then he's in the Navy. He's retired, older than me, I think.
Mhm.
And we had a nice short conversation that started with a provocative statement, just a statement, not provocative per se, but
Mhm.
just a statement.
Mhm.
And that's all it takes. That's
Yeah.
all it takes.
Yeah. And it's when we have put all of these things that we know together, and we will have separate conversations about these separate techniques, right? This
Mhm,
one, I think we're
mhm,
just doing overall. But when you have the ability to put all of those techniques together, from self-awareness, right? From feeling confident, from commanding your conversations and your words, from
mhm,
knowing all the effective versus ineffective questioning techniques, or question types, excuse me, and
mhm.
questioning techniques. I call them the lucky sevens. I teach 7 good, 7 bad, and 7
Yeah.
techniques. Um, Elicitation techniques, rapport building, right? When you have all of these tools, the end result that I know has gotten me in my interrogations has been, thank you for letting me tell the truth. Even though I know I'm going to jail for 2 life
Yeah.
sentences,
Mhm.
even though I'm going to be held accountable or get punished, it feels so good to get that off my chest, and thank
Yeah.
you for that. Now
Yeah. Yeah.
that's when you know you've created that safe environment.
Okay. This is an illustration. And do we have time? I don't know what.
Yes, we
Okay.
definitely have time.
Okay.
Absolutely. This is
A
our
real life
conversation.
conversation. A real life conversation. Several years back. We're out of town. We're not in DC here, and we're talking to a couple whose son is in the army,
Okay.
and of course that's a commonality. And they introduced him, and we talked with him, and I asked him what he did in the army, where he was stationed, and those things. The answers came pretty easy. Then I said, "Well, being on leave, when you gotta be back?" And he said, "Uh, I'm not sure."
Oh no. Oh, I think I
Okay,
know where this is going.
we broke eye contact. We was looking for an answer, and that answer was, I'm not sure. And you and I know, as service
You
members,
know.
when you're on leave, you know the last minute of the last hour of the last day that you've
Yes.
got to be where you can be, and there's never a question.
Mhm.
And so now my wife is a warrant officer, and if we wanted to, we could have taken a real strong hand here.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
but she said, Jim, you take care of this.
Nice.
And of course, his mom and dad didn't realize that being on leave for 3 months was really out of the ordinary. You know, they weren't military before, so they had no clue that 3 months of their son being home was anything out of the
Oof.
ordinary.
Yeah.
And so again, I talked to him. I almost said his name, and I talked to him. I said, there's a warrant out for your arrest right now. You just don't know it yet. You get a speeding ticket, they're going to put cuffs on you. And I created some drama there. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end result was, I said, you got to go back. If you go back on your own, it's better. Now, this is what's going to happen. They're probably going to bust you in rank,
Hmm.
probably going to chapter you out of the army. It might even hold you in some holding facility for a little bit.
Yeah. The brig.
But I said, that's the best thing for you to do
Yep.
and not stay on the run. And he took a bus back to Fort Hood, Texas. They busted him down. They held him for 2 weeks in a cell and chaptered him out of the army. And that was the best outcome
Yeah.
for the worst situation.
Yeah.
But it was because I was looking and listening, body language and the actual words were convicting.
Yeah.
And yet I didn't want to control that. I just wanted to motivate that
Hmm.
and get the best result. And he
Hmm.
trusted me. Okay. Now, if I tell you you're going to go to jail and you're going to lose money and you're going to lose your career, that doesn't create a lot of trust, except that I did it in a way that it sounded reasonable, logical, and he executed. And it was a better outcome for everybody, including the U.S. Army.
Wow. It's interesting. So I call that like the art and the science of communication, right? The science is the techniques. We have the
Hmm.
techniques. The art is how you deliver them. And because you are non-judgmental, non-accusatory, you probably
Hmm.
talked in that same tone. I know your tone.
Yeah.
Your tone can diffuse like a time bomb. It's crazy. Um, and it's that art of how you deliver the message that
Hmm.
really can solidify that trust with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said I don't agree with what you've done,
Yeah.
but I care.
Yeah.
And I said I know your mom and
Yeah.
dad do too.
Yeah.
And so I employed all the different
Yes.
emotions that I could. And I've always thought that that was the best I'd done in a while.
Yeah. That's real. And another great point, right? It's not sympathy, it's empathy. And
Mhm.
just because we're expressing empathy does not mean we have to agree with or like what they did. That's it.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
call I call the elephant out in the room all the time, and I can do so because I had the trust and rapport. I can do so because I'm not judging them, blaming them. I'm not creating this environment where they feel scolded by or degraded or anything
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
creating an environment just like what you did to give a little hope. This is a
Yeah.
little hope.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, this is one human. Who cares about you? I actually care about what
Yeah.
happens to you in your future. I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
help you. Yeah. Huge. That is huge. Wow. All right, let's push forward. So we're kind of been talking about the techniques that we use to build trust from people. Is there any one that stands out that you really go to or you feel super effective when it comes to gaining someone's trust? And it may be like a conglomeration of techniques or it may be like an overarching method. But one thing that stands out for you, like this is my go-to when I am forging trust with others before I jump into that critical point of a
Hmm.
conversation,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
especially when they're going to
Um,
have to talk about things that are uncomfortable, possibly incriminating.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know that I have a name for it. I don't know if I have a feel for it right now, but again, it's just a genuine curiosity.
Yeah.
I've got to know what what truth is. I've got to know what I can do or what I have to do. And so with that, I'm emotionally sticking myself out in front of you, vulnerable for you to either lie to me, for you to tell me the truth. Normally, they don't tell the truth, all the truth up front. They
Mm-mm.
might tell a little bit of the truth, and then I've got to follow up on that because it's just like anybody else. What'd you have for dinner last night? I had chicken. Well, I know they had something else besides chicken, but
Yeah.
that's how we answer questions.
Yeah.
We give you a bit of the information, and so you have to say, well, I like chicken too. What else? And so you expand all that, but I have to really be vulnerable at
Mm-hmm.
first because I want them to meet me in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And if they meet me in the middle, I pull them over to my side.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
but
Love that.
but but they'll like it. Okay, maybe
Yes, they're going to go willingly,
yeah, yeah.
happily, and then they're going to thank you for it at the end of the
Yeah, yeah.
conversation. Yes.
And then that doesn't always work, but that's how I want to start.
Yeah.
That's how I want to. That's just want to. I don't want to have any papers in front of me. I don't want to have any dossier.
Mm-mm.
I want to just start fresh, clear. And I'll lie to them. I'll say, I haven't even time to read up what's your name,
Yeah.
and start just like that and have them say their name, where they're from,
Yeah.
who, just the things about them that they can say without having to hold back and get them used to saying simple things and
Mm-hmm.
then go to the little more personal things. You
Yep.
know, I see on your uniform here that you must be very important. So what unit are you involved with? You know, again, I'm just
Yeah.
sliding in, not, but then again, that doesn't always work. And when it doesn't work, then sometimes you have to bring some drama, bring some energy,
Yes.
but never, ever, ever risk safety or your own integrity.
Thank you. When I deployed to Gitmo, I took my team and I said, listen, I know we've all gone through the Marine Corps certification interrogation schools, of which some of the approach tactics, as you know, because it's out in the FM, what is it, 2 TAC 22, no, 219, 23. I used to rattle that thing right off. I have no idea why they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
did a bubble. Anyway, but the Human Intelligence Collection Manual, right? It has all the approach techniques in there. I
Hmm.
was trained in them back in the day.
Hmm.
And some were fear up, which people mistakenly think, oh, you're losing control and you're throwing furniture. No, that's not it.
No.
It's increasing fear of the unknown. That's what's going to happen afterwards. When is your next meal coming? What is the state of whatever, right?
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
that fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
But there's also a little pride and ego down. And some approach techniques, I was like, you know what? I'll do them in school just to pass and get through the training, but it's just doesn't, they don't align with me. And
Mhm,
so fast forward 2 years after my training, I find myself in Gitmo. And I really felt like I need to create some new techniques here. I need to create some new methods that are all trust-based, non-accusatory, rapport-based methods, because why would anybody want to tell me the truth if I'm not making them feel good, or I am instilling futility, like you have nothing to live for, it's hopeless, you're going to stay in prison? Because if I was in their shoes, I'd be like, okay, I'm not talking. So
mhm,
everything that would help me be effective in getting these people to trust me, to like me. But what I did, going back to that being moral and ethical, is I took everybody that worked with me on my team and I said, listen, I want you to be accountable for everything you say, you do, you see, and you're here. Four things, right? Because one day you will have to be accountable for this on a stand, being judged by someone with lawyers and all of that. Like literally, you'll be in a courtroom because we don't know what history is going to bring. We don't know what the
mhm.
future is going to bring. This is the first time we have ever encountered this, right? Terrorism on this,
Scale,
really,
this scale,
yeah, on
yeah.
this scale, and then having to interrogate. I didn't go to interrogation school to learn how to interrogate terrorists. I went to learn how to interrogate
Yeah,
Russians.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
would that
POWs,
you
and
know
prisoners
this,
of
right?
war,
Prisoners of
in a
war.
camp. Yeah, in a camp, a very structured circumstance. Yeah,
Yes.
the training was never quite to the level. So
Yeah.
there's a whole new,
Yeah.
brave new world here.
This is a brave
That
new
happened
world.
since 9/11.
Yeah, and it wasn't, you're not dealing with the law of warfare anywhere, law of land
Mhm.
warfare, right? You're dealing with terrorism, and there's a
Yes.
lot of bad things. And anyway, so I told my people that because I said one day you're gonna be held accountable. If you're not willing to end every day being okay with what you did, saw, heard, said, being splashed on the front cover of New York Times, you better change your ways, right?
Hmm, hmm,
And
hmm.
so out of all of the people I would tell that to coming to Gitmo, guess who ended up on the stand 7 years after? I did. But that's a whole nother story, which we'll
Yeah.
share at some point. But it's being in line with your moral and ethical compass, I call it.
Hmm,
And
hmm, hmm.
every interrogation I did, conversation, whatever we're going to call it, was in line with that because you
Yeah.
attract more bees with honey than vinegar. That's the
Sure.
bottom line.
Yeah.
I don't have to like you. I don't have to agree with what you did. I would never. I'm not going to. I
No,
think it's
that's not
absolutely
possible
wrong. It's not
for
possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I found that the only thing that I can have in common that's easy with anybody who has that mindset,
Mm.
okay, is I remember these words from a long time ago. Uh, Another interrogator told me, he said, Jim, I kind of just watch Seinfeld and the Food Channel, and that helps a lot. And I said, what? He said, yeah, Seinfeld. It's all about nothing. It's just people talking, and there's no moral thing. There's no lesson
No.
learned. It's just people talking. He said, you're going to do a lot of just talking, a lot of just talking, and it's not going to get you anything except rapport and maybe a lead. But you got to talk about everything in the rainbow before it's all said and done. And he said, then watch the Food Channel because if nothing else, we've all got to eat.
Yes.
And if you can't
Yeah.
talk about anything with somebody who has a mindset different than yours, you can talk about that.
Yeah.
And again, that's a rapport element that, so I've always kept that in the back of my mind. That's some great advice that I've gotten over the years. Food Channel and Seinfeld.
I love it.
And
I
I've never
love it.
watched Seinfeld. I just know about Seinfeld, but I've never watched Seinfeld.
What? You got to be kidding me. Oh.
One show maybe, but I know the concept. Okay. I know the characters.
Mhm.
But and maybe I should watch it. I don't know, but
I've watched
but
every episode multiple times. Yeah. I'm a huge
but
fan.
it was just a nice lesson to say that
Yeah.
you're going to do a lot of talking that won't get you anywhere. And I think Eric Maddox is a great example of that because he was tasked to talk to every high value target,
Hmm.
and he just ended up talking to everybody all the way down to the lowest value target that he had. And
Yeah.
that's where he found the information he needed. And that's why they pulled Saddam Hussein out of that spider hole as he's flying back to the United States because his National Guard time's up.
Wow.
But he broke that time. Have you read the book, the book Blacklist Number One?
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yes.
he actually jumped out of a car that was taking him to the airport to do that last thing that locked in the information that pulled out Saddam Hussein, and he didn't know it had happened till he landed in the
Really,
States.
yeah,
And that's a great story.
that
That's a
is a great
great
story.
testament. And it was my honor and pleasure and to be his faculty advisor at Strategic Debriefing School in Fort Huachuca and be in his aura.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing what a conversation can do, right? When you think about it and use these techniques. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, let's round our conversation out for today with
Okay.
our last tip, because on this channel, I love to give tips and techniques to all the viewers that they can actually bring to use in their personal and professional lives. So,
Mhm.
my question to you is, how can people use these techniques in either their personal or professional lives? And if you were to share one technique with people right now, with the viewers, that they could use in a conversation to help them get the truth and create that trust, what would it be?
Read the data. Everybody's sending you data.
Oh,
Every car that you're following behind that has a bumper sticker on it is telling you what's important to them.
yes.
If I were to have the shirt on that I had earlier on today, you would see a racing logo or something, and that's what's important to me.
Mhm.
And if you're curious about that, we can have a conversation about that. I absolutely look at everybody that I'm looking around and what they're wearing, how they carry themselves, uh, everything about them is sending data,
Yep.
and I respond to it. Uh, I had a conversation with a lady who, if you put us both side by side and said, "What are these two people going to talk about?" and you would say, "Nothing." You would say, "Nothing
Ah.
except her shoes." And I said, "Your shoes make me smile." And she looked at me, wondering what the heck that meant. I said, "Because when I was a kid, I played with Play-Doh, and eventually the colors would all get mixed up and they look just like your shoes. And I love playing with Play-Doh."
Oh my word.
And
That's a
that was
great bridge.
that was the hardest one. I had to try to think, how am I going to talk to this person?
Yeah.
And we had a conversation about being kids and
Wow.
how what Play-Doh smells like, what Play-Doh tastes like, because
Oh,
everybody's tasted things it's supposed
everybody,
to, yeah, yeah.
me included.
And everybody's understood that the colors get mixed up.
Yeah.
And
It's,
her shoes had all these smears of red and green and blue.
that's,
And so they're sending you data from the head to the toe.
mhm.
See something and say something. Say what you see. Say what you're going to say. Then think about what you're going to say and just say it. Just be afraid to say it. Some people just walk by. But
Yeah.
I call this a drive-by,
Mhm.
where I just walk by you and I say something about what I see, and people will stop and talk to me because of that.
Yep.
So don't be afraid to say something about what you see. People are giving you data. Read it and make a statement. It doesn't have to be, don't ask a question. Where'd you get those shoes? Just say something about those shoes. Say something about that shirt. Say something about that car. Yesterday there was a car pulled up by, the whole car was a texture. It wasn't slick paint, shiny paint. It was textured. I said, "I'd like to touch your car." And he was an outdoors guy, and he says, "Well, I had this car treated, so it's never going to rust." And it kind of, and if you go into the woods and stuff, it kind of blends in.
Hmm.
And but I didn't say, "Where'd you get a car like that? Or how'd you paint that? Or why'd you paint that?" I said, "I like to just touch your car and feel the texture." So eh, learn to talk without asking questions, and we can check in on me. I can help you with that. Lena can help you with that. Elicitation is the big deal.
Yeah. And the reason why it's so effective is it really exploits human nature, right? And when you just make a statement like that, people immediately drop their guard, drop that
Yes,
resistance,
yes.
because most people think the only way to get information is with a question. Now, I love my questions, as do
Me
you.
too.
We
Oh,
have
yeah,
taught numerous courses
yeah.
on questioning techniques. I still teach it today. It's bread and butter for me.
Mhm.
But there's a time and a place. And sometimes you don't want to ask that question, especially if you're just striking up a conversation with a
Sure,
stranger,
sure.
or you just invited someone into your office to have a conversation, or you just
Mhm.
met a new stakeholder for the first time, or possibly considering investing, whatever it is, and you want to get to know this person first. Don't interrogate them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Funny that we say that, but make statements, because when you don't ask a question, people don't think you're after anything,
Yes, absolutely.
and they
And you
drop
don't
their
have to
guard.
be, and you don't have to be right. Just like about the Florida lady, I said,
Yeah,
you don't have to be right
you don't.
to get a response, and you get a response, and you have a conversation. So,
Mhm. And for our viewers listening to this, pay attention today, tonight, tomorrow, how many times you engage in a random conversation with a complete stranger because they never asked you a question. They just made a statement that caught your interest. And
mhm,
because of that interest, you felt compelled to, oh, I'll share some information. And
yeah,
that's literally how it starts.
yeah.
Um, when we train like interrogation techniques or interviewing techniques, conversational techniques, we train with that conversational hourglass. And we always start at the top of the macro part, which is making statements, right?
Mhm.
Showing interest, maybe playing a little naive, building that rapport, finding the thread, that common thing that binds us together. And that's when we get our trust. When we nail down
Mhm.
in the middle is where we actually go into slightly different techniques if we have an objective for this
Mhm.
conversation. So I will have to ask you some really good open-ended questions. And then once I get my information, I'm going to ease right back out again. I'm going to talk about how we built rapport, that thing that we have in common. I'm going to show
Mhm.
interest again. I'm going to
Yeah.
let you take over the conversation, pivot it to whatever you want to talk about, and then we end our conversation. And
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
do that, it's brilliant because people are relaxed coming into it, they're relaxed going out of it, and they forget what happens in the middle,
Mhm.
and everything is good.
So many people have asked me how to get out of a conversation,
Yes.
and that's a class in itself.
It truly
But yeah,
is.
but once you know how to get out of a conversation, you're less reluctant to get into a conversation
Mhm.
because you know you can manage it. And that's just
Yep.
it's management, management,
Yep.
management,
Yep.
management. And
Absolutely.
so, but it doesn't come easy. But if you stay focused and engaged, you'll enjoy this whole thing just like we do, and you'll
Okay.
be smiling just like Lena when the day is done.
Yes. I love this talk. All right. So, viewers, thank you for tuning in with us. As former interrogators, speaking for myself, what I want to leave you with is a couple of techniques. Number one, don't be afraid, what Jim said, to have this conversation. Don't hold back in a question. If your gut is telling you you need to investigate something or someone more thoroughly so you know that you're making the right decision, you need to ask some good questions.
Mhm.
And those good questions are going to start with an interrogative, right? Who, what, where, when, why, and how. When you ask a question with those interrogatives and you keep it clear, concise, and simple, you're going to get a narrative response back. You're going to get information you can work with. The second thing is you have to listen to that response because within that response, you may need to ask a follow up question to get more detailed information that's going to, again, help you make the best decision possible. And if it's not, then maybe you move on to another topic, but never, ever leave a topic before you feel I got everything that I need in order to make this decision right. Right. So, a couple of things. Be mindful of the questions you ask because if they're compound, two questions in one, if they're close ended, a yes or no question, if they're vague, if they're long winded, they're going to be confusing and you may not get the response that you want. And it may cause you frustration. Whereas in actuality, we tend to get frustrated with the response, but we should be frustrated with ourselves
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
when we ask a good question, you're going to get a good answer.
Mhm.
Right. So it's just being a little more mindful of your communication practices, the questions you do ask, or the statements that Jim was talking about. We call them elicitation statements you can say to diffuse any resistance and really get that person to want to engage in a conversation with you, to get that trust. And never rush a conversation because if you're going into a conversation that's rushed, you're going to feel a little nervous. And if you feel nervous, you're going to look nervous.
Mhm.
And if you look and feel nervous, you're going to make the other person feel nervous. So always check in with your mindset and your thoughts. Our thoughts drive our behaviors. So just telling yourself, I've got this. I feel really
Mhm.
good. It's so confident in the words I'm going to say and how I'm going to have this conversation. I feel great. And when you go in with that, that other person's going to feel exactly how you feel. We call it mirror neurons. But a lot of techniques from some interrogation. So my question, I'm throwing it out to all of you listening. What else do you want to hear? If you have something that you would like myself or any of my expert guests or Jim to come on and take a deep dive into, it could be questioning techniques, it could be deception, it could be elicitation, it could be about trust, it could be about having that confidence to be confident communicators. Anything that we've mentioned, let us know because we will read these comments and we take them very seriously. And we want to give you the information you want to hear. So help guide us and tell us what you would like to hear next. And before we close out, Jim, where can everybody find you?
Wow. Let's see. Conversationcodex .com is a small in construction base point. Um, I'm on Facebook as James Pyle. That works, and through you, if they want to reach me through you, then
Mhm.
you can give them a phone number or something like
You got it. I do a lot of connecting that way. Yeah.
that.
Awesome. All right.
And
Well,
this has been a
thank
great
you.
connection. Thank you.
Huh?
This just was a great conversation. It was
I
just a
know.
conversation, and wow, very easy. You didn't put me on the spot. I appreciate that.
I try not to. I don't
And
like to do that.
I hope your viewers have found something for their time investment.
Yes. Yeah. Well, listen, any conversation with you, always insightful. I have little sparks going off and I wanted to take notes. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But thank you for
You're
sharing all
welcome.
the knowledge that you have. If you haven't realized, everyone, that Jim and I could have a conversation like this that would probably go on for days at a time, because we love talking about this stuff. But again, tell us in the comments what you would like us to share. What do you want to hear? What you liked about this episode, what you found interesting, what you never thought of before. We want to hear from all of you and have a dialogue. We really appreciate that. So thank you for stopping by. I don't know what that reminder was, but anyway, reminder that we're going. Thanks for
Yeah.
stopping by. Please hang out in this channel. We'd love to see you. And with that, stay safe until the next time. Take care.